Hello everyone, this is Angel Bernis at projectmanagers.org. Today we're going to meet with Cheryl Wilson on risk management. Let me take this time to introduce her. She was the first woman to obtain the risk management professional certification from the Project Management Institute. She has held several high-profile portfolio program and project management and business analyst positions at firms contracting with the US government. She's a sought-after risk management speaker in both the portfolio risk and project risk research areas. Hello, Cheryl. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, Angel?
Very well, also. Okay, the first question is, why do we need risk management?
Well, that's a good question, Angel. And first of all, thank you for having me here to talk about risk management. And as you know, I'm very passionate about the subject because I feel that it is an area that can really increase the success rate of a lot of the projects that are out there. And as you might know, if you've been reading, that projects today are becoming very complex, and they're also very visible in their failure rate. In fact, the Gartner Group of 2011 stated that projects are still failing at a rate of 70 to 80%. So as you know, that senior management is, of course, upset about this. They're concerned about project failure. They're concerned about the waste of their dollars. They're concerned about the projects going down the tube. So they're looking for ways to improve their project success rate. So one business improvement process that organizations can do, and they can do it right, is implement a proactive risk management program. And my business partner and I call this a PRM program, as opposed to what a lot of programs have out there, and that's a reactive program. I believe that a lot of folks, a lot of project managers feel that risk management is a lot of work. And so they try to trim it down, and they try to have kind of the minimal that they can have, because it does take a lot of work. But what's happening is, and you can tell with the 70 to 80% of projects failing, projects are in the risk management area in a reactive mode instead of a proactive mode. And it doesn't take that much to really turn a risk program into a proactive mode. And in the long run, when you're reacting to risks, you're spending a lot more time. You're spending a lot more time with your resources off and doing other things to react than being in a proactive mode. So one of the first things that is a good point to remember about a proactive risk management program is it provides a clear understanding of risk management to your project team. If they know how to identify risks, if they know how to escalate a risk, if they know which risks belong in the project, which ones should be escalated to senior management, they're going to feel more comfortable with the risk program, and they're going to be more interactive with it. And another one, which may be, you may have to think about this one, but you need to explain the need to modify human behavior. Risks are really an action or inaction of human behavior. And then it looks at the precursors of what leads to project failure. And in a proactive risk management program, it gets in front of those precursors. These precursors are actually risks on our projects, and we need to be able to manage them, be out in front of them, and be proactive in managing them, because the ultimate goal is to manage our what we call fit-for-use deliverables. And what I mean by fit-for-use is deliverables that the quality metric has already been signed off by the customer. So when you get to the end of your project and you deliver your deliverables, they're not surprised. They already know because they've signed off on them. So they're going to accept them.
Okay. Well, we know now that we need to be proactive. What is a good definition of a project risk?
Well, there are a lot of definitions that are out there. and depending on your standard that you're reading. But having worked in the risk management area, I've worked on troubled projects and have worked on a lot of in-depth portfolio level risk management situations. The definition that I like to explain to my project teams is it's an uncertain future event that, if it happens, will have a negative impact on your project's fit-for-use deliverables. All risks, except for those that are systemic risks, and I'll explain that in a minute, should be tied to one or more of your project deliverables. When I say systemic risks, you're going to have some risks that are going to possibly affect your project, but your project managers and your team may not be able to do anything about them. For instance, weather, a political environment, things like that. But the risk potential, it should be logical that we can't resolve it. What we have to do is we have to mitigate it.
Okay. What's the difference between risk and an issue?
Well, it's a very important issue or definition to understand the difference between the two. I know that a lot of projects just talk about risks. They don't talk about issues. And in fact, a lot of projects are dealing with issues instead of risks. So to know the difference between the two and having your team understand the difference will really set your project up for a success as opposed to a failure. So when I gave the definition of risk a few minutes ago, when I said it was a negative, it was a potential future event that could have a negative impact, if that event were to actually happen, if it were to trigger into a reality, what you have now is an issue. And there's no longer the probability to impact that, and you have a realized you can't. There's no probability of impact because you have a realized impact at this moment. Since you can't, since the issue is currently reality now, you can't mitigate reality. You have to resolve it. And if you've ever been in a situation on a project where you're dealing with issues, you're spending a lot more time, your resources are pulled off your project, pulled off their schedule to actually spend time resolving an issue. So you mitigate risks, but you seek to resolve issues. And it's really critical to understand the two, because risks can disturb your normal project activity if they are triggered and they end up being an issue. Because the issues will directly impact your project team's attention. It will pull them away from what they're doing. And a good quote that a friend of mine told me a while back, which I remember, and I quote this a lot, from C.J. Stoneman. He says, "It's better to mitigate a risk than to attempt to survive an issue." So instead of being in a mode where you are reacting, it's better to be in a proactive mode, because your team, when they're in the reactive mode of dealing with the issue, is so your schedule and your budget, all those things become so pulled away from what you're supposed to be doing, and that's managing your project, that you're going to find your failure rate increase a lot faster.
Okay, we don't want to reach to the issue. No? And what are the differences between a risk mitigation and issue response?
Okay, and the reason why I kind of chuckle here is this is a great question, and you'll find out on LinkedIn, you'll find all over the place in different practices the terminology of a risk mitigation and issue response. You'll see them slightly different than the way I'm going to explain them here. And the reason why I am going to give you the explanation that I feel is a solid explanation is dealing with risk on teams for many, many years. Risk mitigation, in a mature organization, they understand, they identify, they manage risk primary components. And when I say components, I'm talking about the probability of the risk happening and the impact on the project if it were to occur. And I'm also indicating that looking at a cost impact. When you look at the reducing the risk probability of occurrence, we call it RPO, and the risk cost of impact, the RCI, what you have is a risk equivalent value. And let me give you an example. Say on a project you have determined that the monetary value, if that risk were to trigger, is $100,000. And the chance of this risk of becoming an issue is, say, 1%. The REV, the risk equivalent value, would be 100,000 times 0.01, or 1%, which is $100,000. In proactive risk management, it is the REVs that we use to prioritize your risks and build your mitigation plans. If you use a determinant factor that is kind of a standard out there, the probability times impact, without bringing in the cost factor, you have a more subjective listing of risks, and I find that that's why a lot of projects tend to get lost in the risk management. They may have 100 risks. They may start to do I think it's a probability this, impact that. You're still left with a very large group of risks that you haven't qualified down to a cost factor. In issue response, once the risk potential has experienced a triggering event, the project team will immediately have to start implementing a response plan. And proactive programs have already taken some of those risks that have a high REV and actually put together a planned issue response plan. And it's a plan that is prepared, so if your risk were to trigger and your mitigation plan has failed, your response plan is going to be different than the plan you have to reduce that risk. So by having a response plan already ready, you're even in a more proactive environment. In any case, once a risk becomes an issue, a risk-mature organization will minimize the time and cost of that issue so that the team can get back to what they're supposed to be doing, and that's managing the project with their deliverables on schedule and on budget.
Thank you. In what phase of our project should we start risk management?
Well, in my opinion, it's never, anytime you say it's never too early. I even feel that back when the business analyst, the BA, is collecting the stakeholder requirements and doing the stakeholder analysis, that they're going to be determining a lot of risks at that time, even issues, and if they can mitigate risk at the beginning when the project is starting to be developed, then you're way ahead of the game. Many risks are identified really too late in the project, and so really from our definition of risks and issues, they're dealing with more issues, which throws them into a more of a reactive mode than a proactive mode. So the earlier the better, because you're being more proactive than running your risk program in a reactive mode.
Okay, what is a good way to implement risk management?
Well, we've talked all along about proactive and reactive, so definitely a proactive mode. And I can't emphasize enough that doing risk management in a reactive mode is why most risk management programs fail in projects. It's why a lot of project managers don't want the risk management program there. So a proactive mode is actually the best mode. And let me kind of give you just a little scenario of both of them. A proactive risk management mode, risk management is planned. It's a continuous upgrade of the understanding with your project team. It's looking at risks before they end up being a triggered risk into an issue. It's addressing risk through planning and mitigation and looking at the cost factor. Not a lot of projects do this. being proactive is a maturity process that a team and the stakeholders and the project management need to plan ahead of time and work hard to have established on their program. On the other hand, a reactive mode is the qualitative list of your risks are being listed. You're having a lot of risks that there is no mitigation plan established for them. You have no cost factor that is being brought in. You're identifying risks without sometimes even scoring them. You're scoring them without really understanding the true impact to your project. And a lot of times I've seen projects, major projects, wait until they start to have a few risks identified before they even start the process with their teams. Their teams have no idea what type of risk management you're going to implement. They don't know processes, procedures. They don't know how to escalate a risk. They don't even know how to report a risk to the team, or what a risk register looks like, or who the ownership is, who's owning the risk, who's putting them on the risk register. If you wait until later, you're in a reactive mode, your success rate has really gone down. So just to recap, because this is an important question, proactivity means that the PRM program seeks to improve its own effectiveness by dealing with the risk mitigation, by implementing the risk mitigation strategies very early in the life cycle, reducing the severity on high REV risks, and short-circuiting risks that have triggered into issues by implementing really good issue response plans.
Thank you.
Just to kind of also, before we go on to the next one, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we've put together 8 points. And I'll go over them really quickly here. I know you've been so kind on your website to include a link to our blog and a newspaper, and shortly we'll have a website to gear folks to. But these 8 points are explained more in white papers and ebooks we have out there. But if you implement these 8 points and you're diligent about doing this, you are maturing your organization into a proactive organization when it comes to risk. And the first one is obtain senior management support. I call that the tone at the top. Without having senior management and your project manager to support a proactive risk program or any kind of risk program, your team's not going to be involved. The second one, establish a mindset change through the PRM training for the project teams. If you think about it, risk management is one of really the only aspect of your program where it has the ability to have oversight into all the inner workings of your project. And a lot of project managers aren't really used to this. So if they can understand and have the mindset that risk management is going to touch all aspects of their program, down to skewing their schedule, their budget, then training them on this mindset is going to be a critical start to have them understand and really stand behind your risk program. Third one is establishing goals and objectives for the PRM program. Fourth one, understanding parameters, and I'll go into this briefly because, as we know, every project is unique by definition. You're going to have different project types: IT projects, construction projects, new projects, new development projects, and project size. You are going to have to take some of what I'm saying in a proactive risk management program if it's a smaller project, and gear it down a little bit. If it's a large and a very complex project, you're going to have to gear it up a little bit. And I just mentioned complexity. It could be a small project where you're doing something very small to a project I worked on recently, which is a huge healthcare IT initiative. And project novelty. If it's a new project for your organization and the deliverables are new, that's going to all come into play when we're talking about the parameters. 5, determine PRM roles and responsibilities. What's a risk owner? What's a risk action owner? What do they do? What are their roles? What are the responsibilities? Um, who really owns the risk program? What the role of the risk manager is as opposed to the risk analyst and the project manager. 6, define PRM processes, tasks, procedures, and activities. And 7, develop PRM value metrics. This could be a whole interview on its own, but basically senior management wants to see metrics. So you're going to be identifying metrics for identifying your risks, tracking, reporting, deep down into some deep number crunching type metrics. And 8, monitor and manage the PRM program. So those 8 points, I went through them quickly, but if you're diligent about reviewing those 8 points, that gives you the backbone of a proactive risk management program.
Thank you, Cheryl. Well, I highly recommend visiting the links that you have shared with us. And well, the next question is, sometimes we get a gut feeling about potential risks, and sometimes we might think a risk is small to include. What should we do with any situations where a potential risk could be deemed too small or irrelevant?
This happens a lot. It happens more than I care to admit on projects that I've stepped into. I've heard project managers, really good project managers, tell me that and really it was after the fact, they would tell me, I thought I could deal with it as I was managing my program because I was doing a good job. It just kind of got away from me. So they didn't report it. And then they found later on that had they reported it, even if it was a small risk, and they put it at the bottom of the list, and they just had it so they could keep track of it, they're not going to lose track of it, and it's not going to all of a sudden mushroom. And if you have a risk identified, then your project team is also helping you. You're not in a silo alone with running a risk management program. It takes the entire team. And a good example is the BP oil. They're 3 years later. I just heard them on the news lately where they're still dealing with the catastrophe. Now that risk was in their mind, it was a low probability of happening, but the consequences of that risk, as we all know, is pretty much really ruined the reputation of BP. So I don't think any risk is too small. I think it's in how you manage those risks, which is more important, because mitigation on even small risks, the time it takes is much, much better than trying to play catch up when and if it does trigger into an issue.
Okay, do you have any final advice about doing risk management?
Well, I could repeat myself again and say be proactive, but and I'll say it, be proactive. The basis for proactive risk management is the modification of human behavior. If we can get the teams to understand the importance and identifying risks early, ensuring that they are doing the best they can to put into place some good mitigation strategies, that's a first step. Also, really look at those project precursors that are some precursors to project failure and get in front of them. Proactive risk management means working on the risk equivalent value through successful mitigation activities. Really being diligent about that, looking for the root causes. That's a whole nother topic on the mitigation strategies on how you can reduce your risk, but being diligent about putting together good mitigation strategies. And just planning early in your project. And the key is don't let your risks run you. Manage your program. And as I mentioned, there's a lot more out there. My business partner, Paul Onis, and I are passionate about project success. And a proactive risk management program is such a key part of a success factor for your program. So feel free to visit our links and ask us questions and read some of the white papers we have out there on RMOs and any of the topics that we discussed here today.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl, for sharing your knowledge with us on projectmanagers.org Expert Talk, and I hope to see you again.
Well, thank you. It's a small world, and I hope to see you again too. Thank you very much for having me.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.